representing Judith Barr in Adelaide. The Deputy Liberal leader, John Howard, says if Mick Young is re-elected to the federal ministry, he'll be a marked man as far as the federal opposition is concerned. Terry Hare reports.
The Deputy Federal Liberal leader told the Liberal Party's annual State Council meeting in Adelaide today there continued to be speculation that Mr Young, the former Special Minister of State, would be coming back into the federal ministry after the ASIO Royal Commission had reported. But Mr Howard said the idea that someone who so fundamentally breached cabinet propriety and behaviour should be allowed back into the ministry after an absence of only 3 months was an offence to the Westminster system. Mr Howard said he believed what Mr Young had done was akin to a treasurer in a government giving confidential information of a commercial advantage to somebody regarding a pending change in sales tax or excise levels. The Deputy Federal Liberal leader added, "And I don't believe that anything that Mr Justice Hope says can possibly vindicate or whitewash Mr Young's conduct." End of quote. Mr Howard said Mr Young's conduct disqualified him from the federal cabinet for what Mr Howard called a number of years into the future.
Efforts are continuing at Kerrang in northwestern Victoria tonight to stop a major flood invading the town. At last report, the flood peak was expected to reach the town late tonight to early tomorrow.
Floodplain makes it difficult to pick the true course of the river. A few farmhouses have been surrounded, but there's been no major damage to property or loss of livestock. Because the river is breaking its banks, predictions on when the flood peak will reach Kerrang can only be guessed at. The flood peak at Kerrang is expected to at least match the 1981 level, but there's one significant difference. The people of Kerrang are prepared. Over the past week, working bees have been held and they've filled thousands of sandbags. As usual with riverside towns, caravan parks are the first victims when floods sweep through. At Kerrang, these caravans were made safe several days ago. Other preventative measures include strengthened levee banks along the Murray Valley Highway, work which has been going on for the past week. And in case the Loddon does rise dramatically, these sandbags can be used to protect the road. The river's steady rise will be monitored overnight, but locals say their advanced state of preparation will keep the water out. At Kerrang, Bram Alexander reporting.
Lebanese fighter bombers have been in action for the second successive day against anti-government forces battling the army outside Beirut. The jets were called in again after a night of almost unbroken fighting around the strategic town of Souk El Gab in the hills overlooking Beirut. The authoritative Independence Beirut newspaper, An Nahar, quotes informed sources as saying that Syria has rejected a Lebanese ceasefire plan which Saudi Arabian and American envoys have been formulating. At the United Nations, the Secretary-General, Mr. Perez de Cuellar, has estimated that 150,000 Lebanese have been left homeless in the latest fighting. He appealed for international aid, saying at least $12 million was needed to help the victims. In Beirut, the BBC's Keith Graves has been to the camps in the southern suburbs where, 12 months ago, the Sabra and Shatla massacres occurred.
There's little visible evidence left 12 months later. 300 or 400 bodies lie buried here, another 400 victims elsewhere. The fact that the mass grave looks more like a rubbish tip is not because the people of the camps have forgotten what happened. The Lebanese government won't allow a memorial. They want to forget. They would like to be rid of the camps and their 30,000 wretched inhabitants who live in quite appalling conditions. It was bad enough before last year. Now the residents have to live in shattered slums with no mains, water or power. The sewers failed, so nearby residents paid to have them fixed to try and stop the stench and disease. The camp dwellers couldn't afford it, and anyway, stink and disease are things they take for granted.
The Australian Embassy in Manila says a retired senior officer of the Philippines Navy has applied for political asylum in Australia. A spokesman for the embassy would say only that Commodore Jose Flor, who was believed to have relatives in Australia, had applied in Canberra for permission to stay in the country. Reuters quotes informed sources as saying Commodore Flor had asked for asylum because he said he had information concerning the murder of the Filipino opposition leader Benigno Aquino in Manila last month. He also claimed knowledge of corruption in the Philippines, the sources said, and feared reprisals if he returned home. In Tasmania, police have found human remains in sewage drains behind the home of a woman whose finger has been found in a treatment plant. The Hobart CRB said tonight that a substantial amount of what was believed to be the body of Maureen Ellen Thompson, aged 37, had been recovered. Mrs. Thompson was reported missing last Tuesday, the same day as one of her fingers was discovered at the Macquarie Point sewage treatment plant. Now to football, and in the VFL, Essendon will meet Hawthorn in the grand final next Saturday after an easy win today over North Melbourne at VFL Park. Essendon led throughout to win by 86 points, and the final scores: Essendon 25 goals, 14 behinds, 164 points; North Melbourne 12 goals, 6, 78 points. 4 players were reported after fights in the first quarter. In Perth, Swan Districts won its second consecutive premiership against Claremont, and the scores: Swan Districts 15 goals, 14, 104 points; Claremont 12 goals, 11 points, 83 points. In Adelaide, Sturt defeated North Adelaide in the first semi-final, 24 goals, 7, 151 points to 13 goals, 12, 90 points. And in the Rugby Union Grand Final in Sydney today, Manly won their first premiership in 33 years, withstanding a Randwick onslaught in the dying stages of play. Here are some highlights.
Loose ball for Singh, stolen by Randwick. Maxwell back to Singh, Mark Ella, field goal. It looks pretty close. It's there, what a kick. Very close to the Randwick line. Williams. Big Steve Williams. Pretty good. Yes! Doubt they'll throw everyone into it. Mark Ella to Walker. Glenn Ella. Scores outside. Greg scores. The fullback in front. Mark Ella's inside. Mark Ella. Scores. 5 metres out. It's a try. The try to Randwick. Sensational play. Lloyd Walker's over. And the conversion will level the scores. Bad kick by Mark Ella. Look at Jeff Sale, the Randwick coach. Field goal, right foot. It's out to the right. And is this the end for Randwick? It's all over. And Manly has done it. They have ended Randwick's unbeaten run of 5 straight premierships.
And turning now to yachting. And rough weather and choppy seas have been forecast for the third race of the America's Cup Challenge. Winds of up to 25 knots are expected early, but conditions are likely to moderate later. Australia too goes into the race early tomorrow morning, Australian time, down 2-0, and the rough conditions are expected to favour the American boat Liberty. The Falklands War last year wrought havoc on the island's basically rural economy, but it's had a beneficial effect for one farmer in faraway Wales. The BBC's Tim Evans explains.
It's a long way from Darwin to Denbigh, but the North Wales countryside is not dissimilar to the Falklands. When the Crown agents were looking round for sheepdogs to send to the South Atlantic, they went for the best and placed the order with a small hill farm in Clwyd, which has a habit of producing sheepdog champions. Farmer Glyn Jones is a top international handler and a double winner on the One Man and His Dog television series. He's collected 26 puppies, all of them with an established Welsh pedigree to send to the Falklands. Although just 2 and 3 months old, these are working dogs and are certainly not being pampered. Their diet is meal and biscuit rather than tinned dog food, which is in short supply in the Falklands. They're a hardy breed and well suited to the task ahead of them.
Mr. Jones, what is it about Welsh dogs that makes them so special?
They are simply the best. And obviously somebody over there knows that they are the best dogs.
How do you think they're going to cope with conditions in the Falklands?
Perfectly. They can cope with the conditions in Wales. Been no problem over there either.
The 26 puppies have all been tattooed with a letter of the alphabet to assist with identification after their long sea journey to the South Atlantic next month. But they've also been given names. Alongside Joe, Jill and 3 Mosses, there's a Glyn, a Glen, a Gwen, a Sean and a Di.
Finally now, a look at the weather all around the country. Brisbane, morning showers with a maximum of 25 degrees. Townsville, a shower or two, 29. Sydney, a southerly change, 19. Canberra, fine, 14. Melbourne, fine, 18. Hobart, windy and mainly fine, 14. Darwin, fine, 34. Alice Springs, fine, 30. Perth, fine, 22. And Adelaide, fine and 18. Well, that's the news for now. There'll be further news tomorrow evening at 7, but now, good night.